Hi guys, welcome back to another lesson of Earth Science. Today we are continuing Unit 10, Climate, and we are going to be discussing the second aspect of climate change and global warming in terms of the human impact on climate. Now, the first thing I want to discuss is a little bit different from our lesson yesterday. Yesterday we started off with understanding what climate change is. Today what we're going to start off with is understanding what global warming is. And global warming is defined as the long-term heating of Earth's climate since the pre-industrial period. Now, the Industrial Revolution, which is defined as a transition to new manufacturing processes, occurred between 1760 and 1840. That was the first Industrial Revolution. And this is where rural farms started to transition towards industrial cities that had factories and machines. And these factories and machines were run off of steam power and fuel, and that's how their industries ran. So it was ran off of these fossil fuels that were burning them, and thus releasing carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. Global warming is also due to human activities, primarily burning of fossil fuels, and this increases greenhouse gas levels in the atmosphere. And you can see on the chart at the bottom, it goes over the past 400,000 years of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And again, we know this information by sampling air bubbles that's trapped in ice cores. So we know the exact concentration of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere 400,000, 300,000, 200,000 years ago. But what we're noticing now is that since the Industrial Revolution, since about 1790-ish, 1760-ish, you can see on the graph that carbon dioxide levels have been increasing since that time, okay, substantially as well. But we need to understand what the greenhouse effect actually is. And the greenhouse effect is actually something that is very good and very important. And without it, we wouldn't be able to survive. So a lot of people think of the greenhouse effect like a greenhouse. If you haven't seen a greenhouse before, this is an example of one. It's just basically a house that's all windows, and it lets sunlight in. And this sunlight warms the entire room, which allows us to grow plants and crops inside one of these. Even if it's freezing outside, the temperatures inside that greenhouse would be very warm because the glass traps in that heat. It lets in the sunlight, but it traps the heat that's created. So the greenhouse effect starts off by the sun emitting visible and ultraviolet light. And we remember that that is the short wavelength of the electromagnetic spectrum. So it releases all this energy, and that energy gets absorbed by Earth's surface, and Earth re-radiates that energy as infrared radiation, which we feel as heat. Some of that heat energy is trapped by greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, and these greenhouse gases include carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and water vapor. These are the four main types of greenhouse gases. Now, even with these greenhouse gases, most of the infrared radiation does get re-released back into space, with some of it being retained into the atmosphere. However, if you increase the amount of greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, more of that energy will get trapped, so temperatures are going to start heating up. Now, greenhouse gases, as I said, are good. On Earth, our average temperature right now is 57 degrees Fahrenheit on average. And that's with a composition of the atmosphere that contains 0.04% carbon dioxide. If you took out the greenhouse gases, the average temperature on Earth would be -2 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's a huge difference between having greenhouse gases and not having greenhouse gases. And greenhouse gases are good because it keeps our atmosphere warm. But if you have too many greenhouse gases, that's going to be a major issue. So for example, this is a bit extreme, but Venus has an atmosphere, a very thick atmosphere, but its atmosphere consists of 96.5% carbon dioxide. So the average temperature on the surface of Venus is 864 degrees Fahrenheit. That is hot enough to melt lead. So having too many greenhouse gases is going to be very bad. We do not want to have a runaway greenhouse effect. But there are many ways that humans are influencing the climate and adding more greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. Remember, yesterday we learned that there are natural variations to climate. The Milankovitch cycle takes hundreds of thousands of years. Volcanoes take millions of years to release release greenhouse gases. But we're seeing changes in carbon dioxide that are significant over the past 200 years. So we're not talking thousands of years. We're not talking millions of years. We're talking tens of hundreds of years, which is unprecedented. So that's how we know humans are influencing climate. And here are the main ways that humans influence climate. The first one is burning fossil fuels. So by using gasoline, by using coal, by using oil, we are burning these fuels that are made from plant or animal-based materials. Anything that was once living is considered to be organic or contains carbon. And when you burn carbon, you release carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So a lot of the stored energy, the stored carbon, is now being burnt and re-released into the atmosphere through burning fossil fuels, whether it's driving cars or making plastics in factories, so on and so forth. We are burning a lot of fossil fuels. Deforestation is also a huge source of greenhouse gases. Deforestation is the clearing of wide areas of trees. And you have to remember that trees do consume carbon dioxide. They convert that carbon dioxide into oxygen. But they are also living creatures or living things. When we deforest, when we cut down all these trees, they're not consuming any more carbon dioxide. So the carbon dioxide remains in the atmosphere. But a major way to deforest is through burning. So not only are you not absorbing that carbon dioxide anymore, but you're releasing whatever stored carbon dioxide was in those trees. So it's releasing all of that greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. The third way that people usually don't think of is through agriculture. And two examples that I'm going to talk about with agriculture are through livestock and by growing rice. And there's much more than just those two, but those are two main factors. With livestock, with like the farm that we have in that picture, these animals are releasing a ton of methane into the atmosphere. And methane is 30 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. There's just a lot less methane in the atmosphere. So having a lot of livestock is going to increase the amount of greenhouse gases entering the atmosphere. And that's just through natural digestive processes. Another way is growing rice. And growing rice paddies, especially the ones that are submerged underwater, actually releases methane as well into the atmosphere. So the ways that we're producing food is actually not good for the environment. There are other ways to do it that are much more beneficial, but a lot of the things that we do now are hurting the climate. And one final way, and these are not the only four, but one final way is through urbanization. By moving our people from rural areas to urban areas, we're developing more cities. And when you develop more cities, you are creating less dirt, less grass, and more roads. And those roads and those cities contain darker surfaces. And if you remember from a prior unit, darker surfaces absorb more heat. So when you absorb more heat, it's hotter in those areas. So there's a term called the urban heat island effect. Urban cities are warmer than the surrounding rural areas just because the ground absorbs more heat because the surfaces are darker. So these are the four major ways that humans are influencing climate. And there have been thousands of studies based on this. And 97% of the studies have found that humans are negatively impacting the climate. And one of the major studies is done by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is a United Nations body that assesses science that relates to climate change. And it consists of 195 members that are scientists and evaluates thousands and thousands and thousands of scientific papers that are published each year. And their purpose is to summarize all of these papers to understand all of the factors that are driving climate change, the impacts of climate change, the future risks associated with climate change, as well as mitigation to reduce those future risks. And they are open and transparent reviews of all this information. So you can find all their information online. But every few years, they release a large paper that assesses everything. And the last time they released it, they discovered this. So they found 4 major things. The first thing that they found is that there's a 95% certainty that humans are responsible for global warming, mainly based on the 4 factors that I previously discussed. Another thing is they discovered that carbon dioxide is at an unprecedented level that has not been seen over the last 800,000 years. And again, we can analyze the climate from 800,000 years ago by just analyzing ice cores and the gases trapped in ice. And we're at about 416 parts per million of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere, which has not been seen in that entire time. And there's a direct relationship between carbon dioxide and air temperature. Another thing they found is that sea level is going to continue to rise at a faster rate than the past 40 years. The big thing with that is that the majority of people live by water, whether it's the ocean, a sea, a river. They're right by low elevations, bodies of water. And as sea levels continue to rise through thermal expansion and because of melting glaciers, there are going to be higher levels of water as well. And the last major thing that they found is over the last 2 decades, Greenland and Antarctic ice sheets have been melting and glaciers have been receding in most parts of the world. And that is huge because that is going to contribute to, one, it's going to increase temperatures because ice currently reflects incoming radiation and the dark ground below it will absorb more radiation, but you're also going to increase sea level with that. So those are the major things you need to know. And again, it's not everything that you need to know about how humans impact climate change. Again, I implore you guys to do your research online, but keep in mind all of these studies that have been done already. Find these studies, find these websites that are .edu, .gov to make sure that they're accurate articles and do your work from there. Have a good day.